The Wild West is coming to an end. You can't just pick up a model aircraft at your nearest retailer and plug in the batteries and take off and fly and kind of have a vague idea of some rules. You really do need to be held accountable, and you need to be educated.
You're listening to the Drone Radio Show podcast, the show about drones and the people who use them for business, fun, and research. Hosted by Randy Goers.
Hello, everyone. This is Randy Goers, and welcome to the Drone Radio Show podcast, episode 129. What do you need to know before you can fly your recreational drone? To answer this question, we look to an organization with a long history with remote-controlled aircraft. Chad Budreau is the Director of Public Affairs and Government Affairs for the Academy of Model Aeronautics. The AMA is the world's largest community-based organization of more than 200,000 UAS enthusiasts, organized for the purpose of promotion, development, education, advancement, and safeguarding of modeling activities. In this edition of the Drone Radio Show, Chad talks about the AMA and its mission, what it means to fly responsibly, and how the organization has responded to the growth of the consumer drone industry. Let's pick up the interview where I asked Chad to introduce himself.
My name is Chad Budreau. I'm with the Academy of Model Aeronautics, and I work in the Government Affairs and Public Relations Division. I'm the director of that department.
Chad, for those unfamiliar with the AMA, can you give us a brief history of the organization and what it does?
Oh, great question. Yeah, we've been around since 1936. There was a group of hobbyists who met and decided we need to form a group of people who were enthusiastic about this new hobby at the time and create some ground rules. And so in 1936, this group formed and it has grown into what it is today, 200,000 members across the country, even internationally, which we follow a very strict safety code. Members are afforded insurance as a part of being responsible flyers in the airspace. And we're involved in quite a few assets of what this hobby is all about, everything from education to competition to just good old recreational fun flies. So we have 2,600 clubs across the country, and many of our members are a part of those clubs. We have an equal amount of flying sites and events. It's a very active and fun community.
I seem to remember when I was a kid that if you had an RC plane, you typically went to a designated AMA field to fly. Is that still the case?
There are still 2,400 plus flying fields across the country. And that's a great way to get into the hobby because it's a safe area. You know, it's been vetted and you have accountability with other pilots there and the camaraderie is great. But that doesn't mean you're isolated to those locations. You know, sometimes I'll fly in my backyard. There are a lot of great flying sites across the country, and it doesn't necessarily have to be at an AMA flying site.
So when did drones start showing up on the AMA's radar?
So that's a great question. Helicopters were probably the first version, I guess, of the non-fixed wing aircraft that came into our fold. There were some early multi-rotor platforms decades ago. Now, they weren't as stable, and I think really what catapulted them into what we're seeing today is the stability, and the technology has just made that platform so easy to fly, and it expanded the capabilities. So really, about 10 years ago, as when we really started to seriously, even before that, we really started adopting new safety programs and policies into our safety program to educate our members on how to safely fly these type of aircraft. That grew into documents such as Document 550 and our FPV guidance and other elements that apply to that platform. So, and it's evolving today. We have a safety committee that meets on a regular basis, and we're constantly evaluating what new platforms are out there and how can we continue to improve our safety program.
Did the organization notice a growth in membership as the consumer drone market took off?
Yes, we have. And, it's a great way to get into the hobby. You have, as I mentioned, our education component. We have programs such as Know Before You Fly. We have a monthly magazine. The insurance is a great reason to join as well. So, plus access to the flying sites across the country. So we have seen a growth. And not everyone who owns a multi-rotor or a drone is interested in recreation. There's commercial flyers, and there are those who maybe belong to a different community-based organization, and that's fine too. But we definitely have seen a growth as this industry has grown.
You mentioned the insurance as a benefit for AMA members. Can you tell us what that benefit is and what it provides?
Every member who joins the AMA has to read and sign off on our safety program, our safety code. And once they do that and they've committed to be a responsible flyer, we provide them with a member benefit, which is insurance. And it's $2.5 million worth of insurance. The majority of our members typically don't have to cash in on that. Our safety codes has some pretty safe elements in it that really separate the hobbyist from the aircraft. But occasionally you get a wayward aircraft that may bump into someone's rear view or tail light. You may get a nicked finger from sticking your finger too close to a prop where it shouldn't be. So we do get some claims, but the majority of our members have all of our members have that membership benefit of insurance.
I think that's a great benefit, especially if you're a new flyer and you're kind of unsure of what you're doing or you're trying to learn a new skill set.
Agreed. Oh, it's a great member benefit. And it's something that we not only provide to our members because we think it's a great benefit, but we think it's an important part of being responsible. If you're going to be responsible in the airspace, you need to be financially responsible too.
Right. And that segues into really a key part of our conversation. With so many people buying drones today, what does it mean to fly responsibly? That's
a great question. And we partnered with AUVSI and created this industry-led education effort called Know Before You Fly. And Know Before You Fly has been a great tool that has been adopted by even those outside our community. Best Buy, for example, has embraced the Know Before You Fly education component, and in which they're putting that up in their point of sales and on their website. We've seen other groups like Amazon adopt language from Know Before You Fly. Even communities have adopted it in their education component, and law enforcement have adopted it. And we know of law enforcement officers who are passing out Know Before You Fly literature to new pilots. It's a great resource to teach that new pilot who is maybe just getting into the hobby about what are some of the basic ground rules. What's the 101 on how to fly safely in the airspace?
Can you give us a couple of examples?
Don't fly beyond visual line of sight. That's a big one. At all times, you must always be able to see and maintain visual contact with your model aircraft and be able to navigate in the airspace with it. Don't fly in high winds or during reduced visibility. Stay away from bystanders. Don't fly near stadiums or major events. Those are some of the core principles of what Know Before You Fly tries to educate. A lot of those aren't necessarily intuitive. Someone who's excited and just bought a model aircraft may not think about, I should stay away from people. I shouldn't get too close to bystanders, or maybe I shouldn't be flying it behind structures where I can't see it. So the intent is just to provide kind of a very basic ground school.
Do the rules apply evenly for all consumer drones, regardless of their size or type of drone?
There is some distinction, but not, I would say, when it comes to multi-rotors. Here at the AMA, we do have some very high-performance model aircraft, some very competitive model aircraft that compete in events. For example, we're just wrapping up our national championships, in which we bring some of the most skilled pilots here to AMA headquarters, and they have some very high-performance model aircraft, and they have a very strict set of safety rules that maybe a typical model aircraft wouldn't comply with. But when it comes to multi-rotors, the rules are rather universal, regardless if it's a palm-sized, small little multi-rotor that primarily flies indoors versus maybe a more sophisticated, as you mentioned, like a Phantom. The rules are the same. Keep it in line of sight. Keep it away from bystanders. Don't fly near stadiums, even if it's a small little, less than half a pound model aircraft. The rules are the same. Don't fly it near a major sporting event.
As you mentioned earlier, the AMA has been around since 1936. That's a tremendous knowledge base on which to draw upon. Can you talk about some of the ways that the AMA partners with other organizations and how people can participate in events or activities to gain greater knowledge?
So Multi-GP, for example, is one of our special interest groups, and they have really stepped up to be one of the leaders in drone racing. And so we have a very great relationship with Multi-GP, in which they host thousands of events across the country. And they adhere to our safety program. We guide them on what our safety program is, and we feed each other. There are eyes and ears on the ground, and they can help educate us as to what's trending and what's new, and where's the industry going and what's that next stage. So We think it's important not only to help those participants, but they can help us too, because we need to continue being nimble. We need to continue refining our safety program. We need to continue make sure that our safety guideline is consistent with what's going on in the marketplace. And so there are a lot of great ways to tie into AMA, either directly through a membership, but you'll find, as you mentioned, that our safety program and our safety guidelines are being used in groups outside of who we are. Even Know Before You Fly, we see the Know Before You Fly language being adopted in city ordinances. So in a roundabout way, we are touching quite a few different groups out there.
What do you see as some of the risks or threats that we need to be aware of as the industry continues to evolve?
So we do see a lot of unease with city and state officials. There's a lot of concerns about privacy and trespassing, and those are credible concerns. There's a lot of confusion as to where federal preemption ends or begins, and where can state and local get involved. And sometimes we do see some city and state governments maybe overreach a little, or maybe create some ordinances or laws that essentially ground all model aircraft, the good guys and the bad guys. So that's an area we're closely involved in and closely monitoring. Another area is the technology is just changing so quickly, and it's changing on a daily basis. So just keeping up with what is the new platform. Right now, we think of a drone as a four-propped multi-rotor, but even that platform is changing and evolving. So just keeping up with technology. The other thing that we see a lot of is we see a lot of people want to point to technology as solving a lot of our problems. And I think technology is a great tool. You mentioned sense and avoid or detect and avoid. That's a great tool, but I don't think that's always the answer to solving a lot of our problems. And it's an easy go-to button. All that will solve everything. Really, we think education solves everything. It doesn't solve everything, but education is a key part of keeping our airways safe, which is why programs like Know Before You Fly was created. Because I don't think we should lock ourselves in one moment in time as to, well, this is the technology available today, so it must be the solution. I think we should let technology continue to thrive and grow and advance and continue to educate those operators as to whatever the technology of the moment is.
Now, you may know that I'm a city planner, and drones are starting to become a topic of discussion at the local level. Does the AMA work with local governments in helping to educate them on these issues? We
do. And with 200,000 members across the country, I guarantee you, well, I know we have members in the Tampa area. So part of it is as a service to our members, we want to make sure that an ordinance isn't overly burdensome. Or, sometimes we find legislators may have the best intention of trying to create safety in the airspace, but they may draft an ordinance that could be overly problematic. And it's tough because, as I mentioned, this is an evolving hobby and an evolving industry, so much to the point that even the FAA has created this drone advisory panel. The FAA is saying this is moving so quickly, we need to gather all the industry stakeholders together and help us stay on top of this. And legislators are running into the same problems. It's tough to stay on top of. So we do try to be that resource, and we try to help legislators in terms of how do you correctly educate your community? How do you engage people who, may not intend to do something wrong, but are? Often we hear of stories of, someone's flying over someone's backyard where they shouldn't be. That person may not be intentionally trying to do harm, or they may not have malicious intents. They may not just know any better. And so sometimes just education could solve a lot of that.
Is there a plan to broaden that education? And not only that, is anyone charged with ensuring that the education program delivers an accurate and consistent message?
Two things come to mind. One is Know Before You Fly, in which we have over 200 manufacturers who have committed to promote the program on their website and in their packaging. You mentioned the Phantom, that this is part of their marketing effort and part of their packaging effort to educate users who purchase product. Retailers, a lot of retailers such as Best Buy are promoting Know Before You Fly at the point of sale, included a lot of times on the receipt even. Another effort is the FAA and the industry have joined together to form a UAS safety team. And this team meets at least quarterly, and they're working to collectively find ways to better educate the public. And they have other tasks as well, but they just formed a work group on how to create safety and how to enforce that safety culture and that safety mindset. And they're looking very closely at Know Before You Fly and how can they really embrace that program and build upon it and make it even better. So you do see a lot of industry collaboration as people are getting together and trying to figure out how can we educate people. And Know Before You Fly is a great resource.
That's great. Now, does the AMA have any major initiatives planned over the next year? Things you want to achieve?
Sure. So we are working on quite a few programs. I'll be honest, I probably can't get into a whole lot of it right now, just because it's still in that early phase. But we do recognize that there are a lot of, well, let me put it this way. I'll go to shows like Interdrone, and I am amazed at how many members come up to me at that event, which is primarily a commercial event, or AVSI Exponential. That's a great show, primarily a commercial event. And there are a lot of members who come up to our booth who say, I'm having a lot of fun in this hobby, and now I'm learning that I can make this into a career, or vice versa. Someone who started as a career in UAS and has now realized, you know what, after I clock out at 5 o'clock, I don't want to put down the transmitter. I enjoy this. I want to make this into my hobby. So we are seeing a lot of crossover. And we're trying to figure out a way to best accommodate that and to serve that, because we recognize a majority of our members are always going to be recreation. Our heart at the AMA is always going to be recreation, but we do realize that there's a lot of crossover. So we're trying to improve and expand our education efforts to get more into commercial and some of our member benefits to address that need. One example I can talk of is we formed a partnership with DJI, and it's a training program for emergency responders. And we just launched that earlier this year, and we opened up training courses across the country. And it's not only book training at ground school, but it's also hands-on stick time. And every class we've had is essentially sold out. There's a huge demand for that. So that's an example of where we're trying to cater to some of that crossover.
For so many years, the vocabulary was centered around RC planes. But in the past few years, the conversation has shifted to drones. Has that shift caused any growing pains? And how is the AMA responding to the rise of drones?
I mentioned that we were founded in 1936. And at the time, there really was no RC aircraft. It was free flight or tethered control line aircraft. And so this introduction of drones to our industry is not the first time we have been exposed to a radical game changer. Radio control was a big game changer. Going from gas to battery was a pretty significant game changer. Stabilization of helicopters, pretty big game changer. So this is not our first rodeo. But with that being said, this is probably one of the biggest game changers I think we've experienced. So just as we have in the past, we continue to modify and change our safety program to accommodate that new platform. And we've been on top of that really before I think anyone else. And I think now the next step is how can we continue to provide member benefits? We have a lot of the safety guidance down, but how do we now provide benefits to our members who are heavily interested in flying exclusively multirotors, not only recreationally, but commercially? And again, our heart is always going to be in recreation. That's where we're at. But, we want to be sure we provide member benefits to all of our members.
Can you go over how someone becomes a member of the AMA?
Become a member, you can go to our website, modelaircraft.org. There's a join tab there. In our magazine, we have a membership application. And we're at a lot of events as well. So if someone's at an event, whether it be a club event, it could be a small regional or local event, or if you're at a larger event like AVSI's Exponential, we always have a booth or we have a contest director, we have someone with an application, and we're always happy to bring new people into the fold.
And just so people know, there is a difference between the AMA national organization and the individual chapters, which may have their own membership requirements.
That's correct. So typically if you join a club, a lot of times the requirement is you also be a member of the AMA. So, with our clubs, each club's a little different. Sometimes there are club fees, sometimes there aren't, and they may have slightly different rules. All the clubs have to follow AMA rules, but sometimes they may have some minor changes or tweaks. not so much to lessen the rules, but they may have some adjustments to accommodate their flying site. For example, AMA members are allowed to fly at night under certain provisions, but a club may say, given our circumstance, flying at night isn't the best for our community and for our flying sites. So there could be some minor changes to a club rule, but essentially most clubs all do require AMA membership.
And how long have you been with the AMA?
7 years. I've been with the AMA for 7 years. I've been part of the hobby for many years before that. My dad flew control line. He had a Piper Cub radio control aircraft. So I've always been exposed to the hobby since a kid, but joined the AMA as an employee about 7 years ago.
Is there anything that we missed that we should talk about?
A couple things come to mind. One is what we're seeing in the House and Senate, and that is to really clarify that the Wild West is coming to an end. You can't just pick up a model aircraft at your nearest retailer and plug in the batteries and take off and fly and kind of have a vague idea of some rules. You really do need to be held accountable, and you need to be educated. So know before you fly is a big part of that. But we're also seeing some efforts in Congress in which they're clarifying you either need to comply with Part 107 and fly as a hobbyist under Part 107, or if you're going to fly under Section 336, you really need to belong to a community-based organization, and you need to validate that you're not only following the rules, but you're actively participating and you're being educated by that community-based organization. And the Senate has an interesting section in their bill. They actually task the FAA and other stakeholders and other CBOs to carve out rules for that group of hobbyists that don't want to belong to Part 107 and don't want to belong to a community-based organization. How can they be part of the national airspace and operate safely? So we're seeing efforts on Congress and, of course, the efforts from the industry, such as AMA and AUVSI, to educate people at the point of sale, to the moment they're opening the package, to even to educate law enforcement and city officials.
And my last question, Chad, what message would you like to leave people about the role that the AMA plays in the drone industry and how people might be able to benefit by participating with the organization?
80 years of experience. We have a lot of knowledge. We've learned a lot. I think a lot of people recognize that, and you definitely have to recognize that we have one of the safest track records in all of aviation. Yeah, we have members who may nick their fingers and we have some other incidents, but our safety program has been vetted, it's been time tested, and we have an amazing track record. And we're out there willing to share that. We are part of a lot of efforts in DC is not only do we want to advocate for our members and advocate to protect them, but we want to be a resource. And there's a lot of lessons we've learned and a lot of things that have worked really well that we think can be adopted by others and other stakeholders.
That's it for episode 129 of the Drone Radio Show. I hope you enjoyed listening to Chad Budreau of the Academy of Model Aeronautics and learning about the organization and flying drones recreationally. I want to thank Chad for taking the time to speak with me. If you want to learn more about the AMA or want to connect with Chad, check out the website at modelaircraft.org. If you like the Drone Radio Show, please consider supporting the podcast with a small donation. The content is always free, but for as little as $1 per month, you can help defray the cost of production. To donate, go to patreon.com/Drone Radio Show. Thanks for listening. Your support means a lot to me, and I hope you'll listen to more episodes of the Drone Radio Show podcast to hear how others are using drones for business, fun, and research. For the Drone Radio Show, I'm Randy Goers.
This has been the Drone Radio Show podcast. More information on today's show can be found on our website at www.droneradioshow.com. If you're using drone technology for business, fun, or research and would like to share your experience on the show, please visit our website and fill out a guest appearance application. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media channels.